Hello, I'm Anthony the Poet. I'm a three-time San Antonio Grand Slam poetry champion who has performed all over the United States, from National Poetry Slam stages to recording for HBO's Deaf Poetry to performing at the famous Lincoln Center in New York City. Locally, I've worked with over 20,000 kids throughout the San Antonio area in just the past decade or so, and I'm very excited to be presenting some poetry tips for youth who are interested in submitting poetry and writing poetry for contests like this. So without further ado, I'm going to present some tips for you guys in this very exciting time when it's amazing young writers who are bringing poetry back. Every time poetry is said to be boring and dead, a young man goes and wins America's Got Talent with his poetry. Every time people say that poetry is boring and dead, an amazing young lady goes and gets asked to read her poetry at a presidential inauguration. So without further ado, here are some tips from Anthony the Poet. Tip number 1. Do not take tips from any other poets offering tips on how to write better poetry unless it's me. Most of those other tips are like the tips of icebergs, while mine are like the 90% of the iceberg submerged beneath the ocean waters. Tip number 2. Please ignore tip number 1. I don't know what I was talking about. Tip number 3. Please reconsider tip number 1, because sometimes the best part of a good poem hides from casual observation. Tip number 4, have fun when you write. Writing poetry should give you a sense of enjoyment, at least until you become a serious poet, when your poetry might well become like a somber, sorrowful, and sad creature whose misery somehow brings joy to other people. Until then, wreck 100 journals or 2 with complete abandon and delight. Tip number 5, you are not an I am poem. Say it to yourself, I am not an I am poem. If a teacher or parent hands you a form poem with a few spaces left blank for you to fill in with your own words, this will not result in a poem. Use exercises like these, however, to bring you yet another step closer to writing your own cool stuff. Stay true to yourself. Be original. Remain unique. Dang, that sounds like I just signed the back of your yearbook. Tip number 6, finish strong. I can't tell you how often my fellow judges of youth poetry contests have been wowed stanza after stanza after stanza in a piece, and then it's like aliens had abducted the last few lines and replaced them with something like, then the unicorn licked the lollipop and it exploded. What the heck? That poem wasn't even about unicorns or lollipops or explosions. What happened? Get us from the get-go. Keep your powerful words and get us through it and finish strong with sustained creative energy. Tip number 7, edit your poem and edit your poem and edit your poem. Find better words to use. Read it out loud to a friend. Read it to yourself in a mirror. Put it away for a few days and then read it again, like an artist who comes back to her painting with new eyes. Trust me, in contests for youth, well-edited poems stand out like double suns above the light of the others. Tip number 8, read to write better. A professor of mine once said that you should read at least 100 words for every word you write in order to become a better writer. I thank you for your time in these difficult times. Remember to have fun when you write. And even though life is strange and confusing and lonely and painful right now, remember that poetry has a healing component that will help us all get through this whole mess. Also, remember to be an iceberg. Keep your head above water and the rest of yourself submerged beneath the ocean. That way, they'll never know what hit them. And that doesn't really make any sense either. Maybe I was just thinking about lettuce.